I have a volunteer who's just joined us, but all of us and many of you do read the poetry. There are around 30 volunteers that read at 13 facilities on a regular monthly schedule. And the poems we read celebrate the months, the special days, and include poetry on aging from childhood to the autumn years, humorous verses and serious musings, as well as known poets, and also those from the pens of the anonymous, as well as poems of courtship and love. We begin each session by saying, "We are the Autumn Players from Asheville Community Theatre." I am Deborah.
Kermit.
Barbara.
Mike.
Valerie.
We will begin with poems that mark a holiday or a season.
Are we standing?
Huh?
Are we standing?
Nah.
Okay. The first poem is called "That Was Summer" by Marcy Ridlin. Have you ever smelled summer? Sure you have. Remember that time when you were tired of running or doing nothing much, and you were hot and you flopped right down on the ground? Remember how the warm soil smelled and the grass? That was summer. Remember that time when you were trying to climb higher in the tree and you didn't know how, and your foot was hurting in the fork, but you were holding tight to the branch? Remember how the bark smelled then, all dusty, dry, but nice? That was summer. Remember that time when the storm blew up quick and you stood under a ledge and watched the rain till it stopped, and when it stopped, you walked out again to the sidewalk, the quiet sidewalk? Remember how the pavement smelled, all steamy, warm, and wet? That was summer. If you tried very hard, can you remember that time when you played outside all day and you came home for dinner and had to take a bath right away? Right away? It took you a long time to pull your shirt over your head. Do you remember smelling the sunshine? That was summer.
Now we have an Ogden Nash poem called "It's Never Fair Weather." I do not like the winter wind that whistles from the north. My upper teeth and those beneath, they jitter back and forth. Oh, some are hanged and some are skinned, and others face the winter wind. I do not like the summer sun that scorches the horizon. Though some delight in Fahrenheit, to me it's deadly poison. I think that life would be more fun without the simmering summer sun. I do not like the signs of spring, the fever and the chills, the icy mud, the puny bud, the frozen daffodils. Let other poets gaily sing. I do not like the signs of spring. I do not like the foggy fall that strips the maples bare, the radiator's mating call, the dank, rheumatic air. I fear that taken all in all, I do not like the foggy fall. The winter sun is always kind, and summer winds a savior. And I'll merrily sing of fall and spring when they're on their good behavior. But otherwise, I see no reason to speak in praise of any season.
The
Day Before Christmas by Marchette Chute. We have been helping with the cake and licking out the pan and wrapping up our packages as neatly as we can, and we've hung our stockings up beside the open grate, and now there's nothing more to do except to wait.
Carl Sandburg wrote a poem in celebration of Halloween called Theme in Yellow. I spot the hills with yellow balls in autumn. I like the prairie cornfields, orange and tawny gold clusters, and I am called pumpkins. On the last of October, when dusk is fallen, children join hands and circle around me, singing ghost songs and love to the harvest moon. I am a jack-o'-lantern with terrible teeth, and the children know I am fooling.
This poem is The Thanksgiving Turkey by Jack Prelutsky. The turkey shot out of the oven and rocketed into the air. It knocked every plate off the table and pretty much demolished the chair. It ricocheted into a corner and burst with a deafening boom and splattered all over the kitchen, completely obscuring the room. It stuck to the walls and the windows. It totally coated the floor. There was turkey attached to the ceiling where there had never been turkey before. It blanketed every appliance. It smeared every saucer and bowl. There wasn't a way I could stop it. That turkey was out of control. I scraped and I scrubbed with displeasure and thought with chagrin as I mopped that I'd never again stuff a turkey with popcorn that hadn't been popped.
I hope none of you have to go through that. Long poems are shared by the readers. Many are known by the listeners who join in as a chorus. These familiar poetries include the following presented in a sampler of first verses. First verse of The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. Well, he's somewhere. There he is. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary, over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, "tapping at my chamber door. Only this, and nothing more."
The Village Blacksmith by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Under a spreading chestnut tree, the village smithy stands. The smith, a mighty man is he, with large and sinewy hands, and the muscles of his brawny arms are strong as iron bands.
Yawning by Dr. Seuss. The news just came in from the county of Keck that a very small bug by the name of Van Vleck is yawning so wide you can look down his neck. This may not seem very important, I know, but it is, so I'm bothering telling you so.
This is a visit from St. Nicholas by Clement Moore. Clement did not live in an age of politically correct, so I'm going to try to be politically correct. A visit from St. Nicholas. 'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care in hopes that St. Moses would soon be there. The children were nestled all snug in their beds while visions of sugar plums danced in their heads.
A favorite poem of many verses is Casey at the Bat by Ernest Lawrence Taylor. It looked extremely rocky for the Mudville Nine that day. The score stood 2-4, but 1 inning left to play. So when Cooney died at second and Burrows did the same, a pallor wreathed the features of the patrons of the game.
A straggling few got up to go, leaving there the rest, with that hope which springs eternal within the human breast. For they thought if only Casey would get a whack at that. They put even money now with Casey at the back.
But Flynn preceded Casey, and likewise so did Blake. And the former was a puddin', and the latter was a fake. So on that stricken multitude, a death-like silence sat, for there seemed but little chance of Casey's getting to the bat.
But Flynn let drive a single, to the wonderment of all, and the much despised Blakely tore the cover off the ball. And when the dust had lifted and they saw what had occurred, there was Blakely safe on second and Flynn a hugging third. From the benches, black with purple, there went up a muffled roar like the beating of the storm waves on a stern and distant shore. Kill him! Kill the umpire, shouted someone from the stand. And it's likely they'd have killed him had not Casey raised his hand.
You jumped ahead. Pause.
Then from the gladdened multitude went up a joyous yell. It bounded from the mountaintops, it rattled in the dell. It struck upon the hillside and rebounded on the flat. For Casey, mighty Casey, was advancing to the bat.
There was ease in Casey's manner as he stepped into his place. There was pride in Casey's bearing and a smile on Casey's face. But when responding to the cheers, he lightly doffed his hat. No stranger in the crowd could doubt 'twas Casey at the bat.
10,000 eyes were on him as he rubbed his hands with dirt. 5,000 tongues applauded when he wiped them on his shirt. Then when the writhing pitcher ground the ball into his hip, defiance glanced in Casey's eye. A sneer curled Casey's lip.
And now the leather-covered sphere came hurling through the air, and Casey stood a-watching it in haughty grandeur there. Close by the sturdy batsman, the ball unheeded sped. That ain't my style, said Casey. Strike one, the umpire said.
Oh, I get to do it again. From the benches, black with people, there went up a muffled roar, like the beating of the storm waves on a stern and distant shore. Kill him! Kill the umpire! Shouted someone from the stand. And it's likely they'd have killed him had not Casey raised his hand.
With a smile of Christian charity, great Casey's visage shone. He stilted the rising tumult. He made the game go on. He signaled to the pitcher, and once more the spheroid flew. But Casey still ignored it, and the umpire said, "Strike two."
Fraud! Cried the man of thousands, and the answer echoed, fraud! But one scornful look from Casey, and the audience was awed. They saw his face grow stern and cold. They saw his muscles strain, and they knew that Casey wouldn't let the ball go by again.
The sneer is gone from Casey's lips. His teeth are clenched in hate. He pounds with cruel violence his bat upon the plate. And now the pitcher holds the ball, and now he lets it go. And now the air is shattered by the force of Casey's blow.
Oh, somewhere in this favored land, the sun is shining bright. The band is playing somewhere, and somewhere hearts are light, and somewhere men are laughing, and somewhere children shout. Say it with me. But there is no joy in Mudville. Mighty Casey has struck out.
Our poems cover as many ages of man and woman as detailed in Shakespeare's famous monologue. And I will start at the beginning with a poem by A. Milne entitled The End. When I was 1, I had just begun. When I was 2, I was nearly new. When I was 3, I was hardly me. When I was 4, I was not much more. When I was 5, I was just alive. But now I am 6. I'm as clever. So I think I'll be 6. Now, forever and ever.
Good idea.
I had a book of poetry with these wonderful illustrations in it, and I remember my mother reading me this poem by Robert Louis Stevenson, The Swing. How do you like to go up in a swing, up in the air so blue? Oh, I do think it is the pleasantest thing that ever a child can do. Up in the air and over the wall, till I can see so wide. Rivers and trees and cattle and all over the countryside. Till I look down on the garden green, down on the roof so brown. Up in the air I go flying again. Up in the air and down.
This next poem is When I Was 1 and 20 by Alfred Edward Houseman. And then when I finish reading the poem, I have a question for you. When I was 1 and 20. When I was 1 and 20, I heard a wise man say, give crowns and pounds and guineas, but not your heart away. Give pearls away and rubies, but keep your fancy free. But I was 1 and 20, no use to talk to me. When I was 1 and 20, I heard him say again, the heart out of the bosom was never given in vain. 'Tis paid with sighs aplenty and sold for endless rue. And I am 2 and 20, and oh, 'tis true, 'tis true. So my question for you is, when we read at the Veterans Administration, and of course many of these poems have been written some time ago and the language is not always colloquial language, and so we ask the vets, if they can identify or define a particular word in a poem. So the word I'm going to ask you to define is from the verse, "'Tis paid with sighs aplenty and sold for endless rue." R-U-E.
Regret.
Outstanding. You get the tangerine.
Grazie.
We started with candy bars, but someone on the hospital staff whispered in my ear, "Mike, it's a hospital."
That's a good reason to give them candy.
On Turning 40 by that famous poet Anonymous. I'm tired of those who find 40 old. It's only 4 times 10, and I love being 10. Why not be 10 and again and again? 40? It's only 20 twice. It's only twice a score. And scoring twice is very nice. At that age, you can't ask for more. So don't come to me for sympathy. I never count age with men. The best man I've had was 50 years old, and I'd love to see 50 again.
Warning by Jenny Joseph. This poem's also known as Purple. And these words created the Red Hat Club. If you'll remember the women in groups who wear red hats and purple outfits. When I am old woman, I shall wear purple with a red hat which doesn't go and doesn't suit me. And I shall spend my pension on brandy and summer gloves and satin sandals and say, we have no money for butter. I shall sit down on the pavement when I'm tired and gobble up samples in shops and press alarm bells and run my stick along public railings to make up for the sobriety of my youth. I shall go out in my slippers in the rain and pick the flowers in other people's gardens and learn to spit. You can wear terrible shirts and grow more fat and eat 3 pounds of sausages at a go, or only bread and pickle for a week, and hoard pens and pencils and beer mats and things in boxes. But now we must have clothes that keep us dry and pay the rent and not swear in the streets and set a good example for the children. We must have friends to dinner and read the papers. But maybe I ought to practice a little now, so people who know me are not too shocked and surprised when suddenly I am old and start to wear purple.
Let Us Be Merry by John Philpott Curran. If sadly thinking, with spirit sinking, could more than drinking my cares compose, a cure for sorrow from sighs I borrow, and hope tomorrow would end my woes. But as in wailing there's naught availing, and death unfailing will strike the blow, then for that reason and for a season, let us be merry before we go. To joy a stranger, a wayworn ranger, in every danger my course I've run. Now hope all ending and death befriending, his last aid lending, my cares are done. No more a rover or hapless lover, my griefs are over, my glass runs low. Then for that reason and for a season, let us be merry before we go.
So you all know Dylan Thomas's "Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night." This is a reply to that poem. It's called "Answer" by Anne Hoskins.